right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mishnah Mondays. Couple of actually, just one announcement before we get started, which is that I'm having a book release party tonight at Ikar. So if you're in the area, if you're in the Los Angeles area, then please come join me to help celebrate. Here's the information for that. And if you're not in the area, you can Zoom it also. So just like for those who join me for my Thursday class, my Parsha class, this book is in that spirit. It's a Parsha book, and so you'll enjoy that. But this is a different experience, this Mishnah class. And I was just talking to someone about the Mishnah class, and she said she likes the Mishnah class even more than the Parsha class. I was like worried not to offend me because I'm such a Parsha nut, but she likes the Mishnah class even more because this is where that's like literature, and we do kind of literary analysis, but this is where you get like core Jewish knowledge. And I was delighted. I was not offended. I was delighted. She's with us here today, but I won't name her. But I was delighted by that, because that's what I mean for this class to be, is just building our Jewish knowledge, the kind of core, key, I often say kind of crunchy Jewish knowledge. And today we're definitely going to try to wrap our minds around a piece of crunchy Jewish knowledge. It's a famous institution in Jewish life, but a very strange one, and one that is often mocked, actually. One that is often mocked. And to make that point, I want to start in an unusual way today. I want to start with a video, which it's about 4 minutes, but it's worth our time to introduce the topic, both the topic itself, but also the kind of strange controversies and also the kind of mockery that ensues from our topic of the day. So if you would, Vera, please cue the video here.
Strife and fighting overseas, it's easy to lose sight of the turmoil at home. There are hot spots here that are disintegrating into chaos as the world sits idly by. Wyatt Cenac traveled to Long Island and filed this report.
We've all heard about the religious structure that's been enraging Manhattanites. Now a similar controversy is engulfing Long Island.
Call it a holy war in the Hamptons.
Residents of the village of West Hampton Beach says the proposal of an Eruv is an outrage.
That's right. A Jewish Orthodox group has been given permission to erect a religious boundary called an Eruv around West Hampton Beach, a structure supporters claim will be harmless.
It's just a religious freedom issue. And if your religion requires that Eruv, you should be able to do it.
But for others, it's an aesthetic issue.
It would totally transform the look of this town, which I enjoy.
What does an Eruv look like, Charles?
Basically, you wouldn't even see the thing. It's a matter...
You wouldn't see it?
No, because it's a line. It could be a thin line running through the poles in the street around a whole area. It really is almost invisible.
Yes, these beautiful seaside power lines will be ruined by this. Wait, this. Over here. See? What is the problem with letting them have a string around the town?
It will attract many, many Orthodox Jews who want to break the rules of their religion.
Oh, so maybe the view he's talking about is less this and more this. The Orthodox want an Eruv because Jewish law prohibits performing daily tasks on the Sabbath. Everything from pushing a stroller to even carrying keys. To get around this, scholars came up with the Eruv. From the Hebrew word loophole, it's an invisible boundary which allows you to break God's rules. Like they say, what happens in Eruv stays in Eruv. If I were in an Eruv, can I kill a man?
No.
Oh, okay. If the string is virtually invisible, why not just pretend it's there?
You can't say it's there and it's not there. If you're not involved, it's imaginary to you.
But it's imaginary.
It's real, but it's imaginary in a metaphorical sense.
So it's really imaginary.
It's not quite like Alice in Wonderland.
It's more like Mr. Snuffleupagus? I went to West Hampton Beach to save the town before it became a lawless Wild West. Bank.
You know, it allows them to push their carriages, and it's okay.
But first they start pushing their kids. Next they start pushing their Orthodox agenda.
I think that people just need to be more open-minded, and I think it'll all work itself out.
I'm not worried about the Eruv, really.
Restaurants like this bakery are going to have to become kosher.
This bakery's already kosher.
Wow, it's already begun. And what's most shocking are the hardball tactics the Orthodox are using against the established Jews.
One of them tried to explain to me very loudly that she could not shop on the Sabbath, and then I said to her, take your große tuches, which means very large behind, outside of my store.
That's just seems rude on their part.
Exactly. They are a very closed-minded little group.
That's why Charles and the other open-minded Jews created an organization to keep Orthodox Jews out of their town. Whatever you all are doing, it has to be horrible. You made a 73-year-old Jewish man complain.
I envy him, because if that's the only thing he's got to complain about is that fishing line up there, boy.
There had to be a way to bring peace to this troubled land. Perhaps a compromise.
An Eruv hat?
Yeah, look, huh? Got myself a nice little bacon sandwich and a glass of milk. Check me out. Oh. Watch this. Look at me. That's delicious.
Even if you had an Eruv from here to California, you can't eat that.
It's ironic that both groups with 4,000 years of shared history were choosing to ignore tradition. Charles, we should keep the Hamptons the way they're supposed to be. Christian.
Well, I totally disagree with that, because the Hamptons are for everyone.
Except apparently these folks.
Yes, we are against their little group taking over our way of life.
And the best way to protect your way of life? Make sure Orthodox Jews can't practice theirs.
All right. All right. All right. So that's our topic for today, is the Eruv. As Wyatt Zanak said very well, Hebrew for loophole, which is not true. But but what else did he say? A line, a string within which you can break God's law, right? So that is our topic for today. Both the Eruv itself. What is the Eruv? I'm sure many of you have heard of it, and it becomes a kind of a hallmark institution in Jewish communities because it allows for a more It allows for an easier practice on Shabbat, but it is at the center of controversy. Sometimes people don't, because it will bring in observant Jews, and sometimes Jews or non-Jews, as was highlighted here, don't want that. But also, they were able to make this extended joke about it because it seems like this is the very definition of a loophole. It seems like this is just a completely fabricated legal construct that allows you to actually break the law. So is that the case? Where does the Eruv come from? Where's the idea that we should have it, that we could have an Eruv, and is it legit? That'll be the line of our investigation today. So let's say a blessing and we'll take a look. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Okay. All right. So an Eruv. First, we have to figure out what it is that an Eruv is permitting that is usually forbidden. And the word for that is hotza'ah, which means taking out. And actually, the beginning of Tractate Shabbat which we studied a long time ago, the beginning of Tractate Shabbat, starts with the laws of hotza'ah, of taking out. And the basic principle is that you cannot transport goods on Shabbat from a private domain to a public domain, or from a public domain to a private domain. That's the basic understanding. It's not that you can't carry anything on Shabbat. You can pick up, a glass. It's just that you can't transport things on Shabbat to move them from one reshut, one domain to another, and particularly from a private domain into a public domain. And in general, you can't carry things around in the public domain. You can carry on Shabbat only in a private space, in a personal space. Okay, so that's where we start. Now, here is a source sheet for today. Where does this law come from? Does it say in the Torah that you can't do this? Well, not exactly. Oh, call from my mom. Hold on. Not exactly. And that's part of where our murky conversation begins, is to go back and look at the Torah and see where is the very idea that you can't carry things around on Shabbat. So take a look here at our source sheet, and we'll just look at some of the laws that we will be loopholing our way around. And as you'll see, here we're going to talk about undoing the laws of the Torah, but the truth is, it's not so clear even in the Torah that what these laws are, or that they are explicit laws. But these are the verses that we use to learn out the concept of hotza'ah, of the prohibition on carrying things or taking things from one domain to another on Shabbat. This right here is early in the Exodus story, before they even receive the Torah, when they're first getting manna. Okay, manna from heaven. God announces, I will feed you through manna, and you'll go and collect this manna every day, but on Friday, you'll get 2 portions, one for Friday and one for Saturday, so that you don't have to go collect it on Saturday. And it's not explicit, but the implication there, our tradition understands, is because you shouldn't be going and collecting things on Shabbat. So mark that it is the eternal, see that it is the eternal, who having given you the Shabbat, therefore gives you 2 days' food on the 6th day. Let everyone remain in place, okay? Shvu ish tachtav, al yetze ish mimkomo b'yom hashvi'i. Let everyone remain in place. Let no one leave the vicinity or leave his place, literally, on the 7th day. Okay? Not clear, I would say, what exactly the prohibition is. Is it that you are not supposed to travel on Shabbat? Is it that you're not supposed to gather things on Shabbat? Is it you're not supposed to provide for yourself on Shabbat? Okay, but here we do have the first idea that one act of carrying, going out and getting stuff and bringing it into your home, you shouldn't do on Shabbat. Again, it's in the midst of a narrative, but it does seem like God has intentions. God is describing, the Torah is describing the laws of Shabbat. Okay, there's another verse, but that's pre-Torah. So it's not so clear that it should be taken as a law. But here comes another verse that we get after the Torah is given. When I say after the Torah is given, I mean that in the middle of the book of Exodus, in Parshat Yitro, there's actually the revelation, and everything that we're hearing from God thereafter is understood to be law. Before then, even the things that God is telling people to do are usually not understood to be law, with some exceptions, like circumcision we saw recently is one of the exceptions that was given to Abraham and is nevertheless understood to be a law that carries forth into the future. But pre-revelation, we don't know how seriously to take even the commandments that God seems to be giving. But here's another oblique reference to not carrying on Shabbat. This comes from the description of the building of the tabernacle And people are bringing things. And famously, everybody brings something and donates to the tabernacle for the construction of this portable desert temple. And then, as we're closing out the book of Exodus, Moses had this proclamation made throughout the camp: let no man or woman make further effort toward gifts or the sanctuary. So the people stopped bringing. Okay, stop bringing stuff. We've had enough. It seems like, again, it's not explicit. It seems like in the context of the story, it's just that we don't need any more goods. But by tradition, we understand this to be that Moses saying Shabbat is coming, and so we no longer should be transporting goods. Now, why is that? Let's click in and see here. Okay. Here's the description. Stop bringing the stuff. And if we scroll back, let's see here. No, I can't even find it here. You have to scroll back a ways. But at the beginning of this description of building the temple, we have another mention of Shabbat. So since Shabbat is mentioned near the building of the tabernacle, a lot of the laws of Shabbat, not just carrying, but a lot of the laws of Shabbat are founded on the constructing of the tabernacle. Whatever we did to construct the tabernacle, we can't do on Shabbat. And then Moses says, okay, stop bringing things. And our rabbis understand, oh, it must be that Moses is saying Shabbat is coming. You should stop bringing things, okay? As you can see, that is all a little hazy. It's not, the Torah never says, don't carry on Shabbat. But then again, the Torah never really tells us a lot of the laws of Shabbat are derived through, as I just said, some understanding that the tabernacle is the kind of work that's done in the Torah. You can't do work on Shabbat, so whatever work was necessary for the tabernacle, you can't do on Shabbat. It's like steps and steps and steps and steps to get to the law. There's one other source, just so we have all the information that we need from the Torah before we dive into the laws of the Eruv, and that is actually a story that comes much later in the Torah, a story in the book of Numbers of, let's see here, a story in the book of Numbers of once when the Israelites were in the wilderness, they came upon a man gathering wood on Shabbat. Okay, again, it sounds like it would be hard for us to. That man, by the way, is eventually killed. So it's clear that he was not doing the right thing, although, you know, that punishment seems a little startling to us today, because we don't execute the death penalty anymore in our tradition. But there it is, 3 instances, some more explicit and some less, but none of them entirely clear, but together forming this idea that one of the prohibitions on Shabbat is carrying, but specifically, as you can see in these contexts, carrying in order to bring something from the public space into the private space, like I need wood or I need manna, or bringing something from the private space into the public space, like I have gold in golden jewelry and I'm going to donate it to the tabernacle. Okay, so those are the laws of carrying, at least the origins of the laws of carrying. And when we began the tractate on Shabbat, we began with those laws. And this next tractate, that we're about to look at, is the second in the order of the Mishnah known as Moed, the holidays. It starts with Shabbat, which is sort of the foundational holiday. Many of the other holiday laws are learned from Shabbat. And then the next tractate is Eruvin, which is really just like a continuation of the discussion of Shabbat. Okay, so let's take a look at Eruvin. But again, we need yet another introduction, another piece of information it's going to be totally incomprehensible to us without a little bit, I think, of visual aid. I will say this. Masechet Eruvin is famously one of the most difficult tractates of the Talmud. It is dizzying. There are two kind of hallmark, most difficult tractates of the Talmud, and one is Yevamot, which deals with the laws of the Levirate marriage, of when your brother dies and didn't have any children with his wife, then if you're his brother, you can marry that wife and have a child in his name. But again, it's a tractate in which the rabbis say, well, you can do that, but you can't do that if, and they kind of unwrite the law. So interesting that the two most complicated tractates have to do with figuring out a way around what seems like the obvious biblical law. So no wonder they're so dizzying, but they're so dizzying, and the Talmud itself is pretty dense and intricate, but these are famously some of the most difficult tractates. And so let me just say, as a huge caveat at the outset, I don't know the laws of Eruvin very well, and most rabbis don't. In fact, when an Eruv is constructed, you always bring someone in, a consultant, to carefully go through the construction of the Eruv to make sure it's done by the book. So, pardon me in advance if I'm not able to field all the questions, or if I don't give us a full picture of what an Eruv is. Today's mission is just to see, where does the concept even start? What does it require? And does it make any sense to us? Because I do think that there is some, though it seems like the greatest loophole in the world, you just put a string around an area and now the whole area is a private domain. We'll wrap a string around the entire city of Los Angeles. In fact, Los Angeles, I think, has the largest Eruv in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. And it encompasses, I walk from my house to Ikar, crossing major thoroughfares, right? So it seems, I'm in a private domain because we got permission from the city to agree that this is all our private domain. Not to mention that most of the people who live in this domain do not keep Shabbos, are not Jews, are not interested in the Eruv. So all of that feels like almost farcical. But I think if I do nothing else today, I want to insert the claim that there is something about this that is very much grounded in that basic concept that we've just started with, which is don't move from things from private into public, or from public into private. Okay, I've got a hand up already. Yonatan looking very cool with his sunglasses in his car this morning. What are your thoughts?
Thank you. I try to look cool. I want to say it sounds farcical when you put it like that, but I'm lucky to be in a relationship with someone who is much more observant than I am. And we visited Israel, and the first Shabbat there, they needed to carry something around, and we made an effort to figure out whether there was an Eruv, because they wouldn't carry if there wasn't an Eruv. And in the process of figuring out whether there was an Eruv in town, we encountered a lot of the care that went into it, in terms of you have to consult with the people that whose fences connect to the Eruv, and there's someone who's in charge of I'm sure you're going to go into a lot of these details, but there's someone who's in charge of checking that it's intact. And so it really builds community, and it builds this collective sense of the domain. And then a couple of weeks later, we were walking around, we were just strolling, and went down into the valley, and we happened to see the Eruv, just barely. It's this really thin little line, and it's kind of like you said, it runs. There's a valley in this town, in Novoselic, Zion, and it just runs right across the valley over the interstate. This tiny little line running over the busiest highway in Israel to connect the two sides of town. And I do think there's something very deliberate about it, and very compelling to me.
Good. Okay, good. So Yonatan is naming some of the sort of social psychological implications of needing and constructing an Eruv. And I think you said it helps build community, because everybody has the whole point of an Eruv. The word Eruv literally means mixing or coming together. And the whole point is to bring everybody together into a collective agreement. That very act is a kind of community gathering. So that's important. And Yonatan is describing the deliberate nature, the attentiveness that is required in the construction and the maintenance of an eruv, which is to say that there is something about an eruv that is, though it is physical, they were joking about this in the clip, though it is physical, ultimately there's something about it that is conceptual, or I would say psychological. And I think that the rabbis very much intend for that the purpose of the eruv may not be to actually change anything, but to alert one's consciousness to the spaces that already exist. Okay, so we'll start to see this more, but those descriptions are helpful, and I thank you for that, Yonatan. Another hand from Marilyn.
Well, I just want to say, I am someone who the story with the guy who picks up sticks on Shabbat and gets stoned to death is one of my, like, I hate this story. I have not ever figured it out. However, it has occurred to me sitting here listening to you that as much as I hate that they point out, well, it's because the rabbis usually just say, well, he broke Shabbat and it's important to know how sacred Shabbat is. That's what that story's about. And that never flew with me. But I'm wondering now if it's about the eruv, like it kind of gives us the interest to the eruv for all the reasons you just said, that the guy should be able to pick up sticks on Shabbat to help to feed his family, whatever it is. And if the eruv was in place and if we were truly in community, we would have that. So I just have to say that was something I would never think of before in that story, that maybe that's why it's the source of the eruv, because we need it so we don't have to stone these people to death. It shouldn't have to happen.
Right. So that's an interesting way to put it. We need the eruv so we don't have to kill people who are violating Shabbat. I mean, that's one way of putting it, that it creates a space in which, even the less observant will technically, there's a way in which it's kind of a generous move. Another way to put it is that that everything you're saying suggests that that Shabbat, in its purest form, practiced strictly, is too much. It's just too much, because as you saw in that video, one of the ideas around the eruv is that you can't carry a baby or push a stroller. I mean, that seems unlivable, right? So if you have a baby, you're just trapped at home, and many people are. So there's a kind of part of our conversation is, you can talk about legal loopholes and the ridiculousness of it, but you can also feel that it's motivated by real human need, right? Social needs, as Marilyn was describing, the kind of the interaction of communities within communities where people are adhering to different standards, and also just basic human needs. Like I need to leave the house. How am I going to do that? Okay. I'm seeing more hands come up. I want to get into the material, but I'll take one more hand from Ellie. We can't hear you, Ellie.
There. Okay. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Years and years ago, I belonged to what I call the Jewish camping club. And we'd go out on Shabbat. We had no idea where the eruv was. And one time, an Orthodox observant family came with their tent, set up their own eruv within their campsite. And unfortunately, what that did was create distance. It didn't create community, because nobody outside of the eruv would even, I don't even know if they're allowed to come into it and to say hello. Nobody talked to them. It was really an off-putting experience, but and I don't think that's the intention at all that they had of creating a community, because there they were in the middle of a group of maybe 20 motorhomes, and they were just right there. I felt really bad because nobody would talk to them. And there was another comment on the chat that asked, if you can't leave the eruv, how do you go to synagogue? I haven't thought that through. So that's okay. Let's see you tonight.
Okay. Oh, awesome. Thanks, Ellie. So that's right. And the video, although it's funny, kicked up some serious issues, real communal tensions. And sometimes,
Yes.
as I said, those tensions are between Jews and non-Jews, but actually more often the tensions are between various factions within the Jewish community. And it cuts, I'll just say, so that's also part of why we're studying this, so that we can be conscious of what exactly is at stake here. But it cuts both ways. That is, Ellie's describing a situation much like the one on the Daily Show there, where there are just there are Jews that are more observant, that come in, they require the Eruv, and it kind of creates a separate community. And you feel like these Jews come in, but they're not looking to integrate with the other Jews in the community, or the other Jews in the community are not interested in integrating with them, as in the case of in that clip. So there's tension in that way, but there's also tension in the other direction, where some people will erect an Eruv, and it will not meet the standards of another Jewish group who also is extremely observant but doesn't hold by that Eruv. Okay, and then you've got tensions where some Jews are carrying within the Eruv according to their understanding of the law, and other Jews are not carrying with the Eruv, and often, implicitly or explicitly sometimes critiquing those who do hold by the Eruv. That Eruv's not kosher. Okay, I'll tell the famous joke, and then we'll start our learning for the day. The famous joke is that there's these jokes are like only funny when you're actually talking about the Jewish law in question, right? Out of context, they're not funny, but hopefully this will be funny. That there's like these two guys who have been learning together in Chevruta for 20 years. They learned Talmud together, and one of them says, "Oh, by the way, next week I'm making a bar mitzvah for my son." Oh, the other one says, "Mazel tov, mazel tov." He's like, "Yeah, come to shul. I want to give you an aliyah. I want to call you to the Torah. You're my friend, and I want to honor you at my son's bar mitzvah." And he says, "Oh, that's so kind of you. That's so kind, but I'm afraid I can't, because I can't receive an aliyah because I'm not Jewish." And the first guy's like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah. No, I'm not Jewish, so I can't receive." He says, What do you mean? Like, we've been learning together. We've been learning Talmud together for 20 years. And he says, "Yeah, well, I just love Talmud. I love Judaism, but it never made sense for me to cross out. I have a family also. I respect the Jews, love the Jews, but I'm not Jewish myself." So he's like, "But what do you mean? Like, I see you keep Shabbat, and as well as I do, you've studied Shabbat is for Jews, and actually non-Jews are not supposed to keep Shabbat. Like, that's part of the understanding." He's like, "Oh, no, I don't keep Shabbat. I like to participate, but I always carry a rock in my pocket when I walk around, just so that I'll be technically not keeping Shabbat." And the first guy goes, "But what do you mean you keep a rock in your pocket? Don't you? There's an Eruv in this town." And he says, "That Eruv? I don't hold by that Eruv." Right? So that's the joke. Okay, let's take a look at where Eruv comes from. Okay, so in order to understand Eruv, it is so, let me just show you the beginning of Tractate Eruvin, which is actually where we're going to end today in considering the beginning of it's almost incomprehensible. The first lines are, if an alleyway is higher than 20 cubits, that's a typo, higher than 20 cubits, one must lower the height. And Rabbi Yehuda says one need not. It's like, what? We don't even know what you're talking about there. It's just like, we enter into discussion just presuming that Eruv is already a pre-existing institution. They're just talking about it. So we don't even get a lot of the background, and that gets fleshed out in the commentaries and in the Talmud itself. But before any of that, let's take a look. What we really need here in these most difficult tractates of the Talmud, what we really need here is a picture, okay? And I put one on your sheet, and this is a picture that approximates or imagines the communal settings in the towns and cities that Jews used to live in the ancient world, in ancient Israel and the surrounding regions. So take a look here at this picture, I think will be helpful. So these are our houses, right? This is the idea. Every one of these is a private domain. And it would often be the case that many houses would share a courtyard. So in this case, it's just two houses sharing this courtyard and two houses sharing this courtyard. But you can imagine without these walls, it would be all these houses sharing in one big courtyard. So there are many arrangements for houses sharing a courtyard, okay? So now, when houses are obviously private domain, and you can carry inside your house. The question is, can you carry in the courtyard? Now, is a courtyard private domain or is it public domain? Well, it's kind of in between, isn't it? It's shared, but it's not open to the public. It is private domain. And you should be able to visit your neighbors and maybe get invited for Shabbat and maybe bring something that you baked as a contribution to the meal for Shabbat, okay? You should be able to, but there is a concern that maybe, well, let's say the law first. The law is, in order to consider the chatzer, the courtyard, to be private domain, one must use an item of food that is cooked by one of the members and put that item of food in another member of the courtyard's house. And everybody in the courtyard agrees now that we've already started trading food, that this food will be the collective food. We're all sharing in this food item, and therefore we're all joined together. We're all as if eating a meal together. And you will see this idea come up in the 3rd chapter of Masechet Eruvin. One may mix and join with anything but water and salt. Again, very, very cryptic, but that's what they're referring to. Water and salt are not sufficient food items to create a joining between two houses. But if you give someone cookies or a hamburger or anything but water and salt, then you've come together, and then it's clear that this passageway in between is also, are you seeing my arrow, by the way, my cursor? Everybody seeing that? Yeah, good. So then that also is now private property. That act of exchanging food is required for people joining together in their courtyard, and that's called an eruv chatzerot. A eruv, again, a mixing together of courtyards, of shared courtyard spaces. Okay, but that's not the end of the private public question, because it was also true that these living arrangements would have houses, courtyards, and then this area, a mabui, or an alleyway or an entranceway that led from the outside into the inner courtyard. Okay, now the question is a very kind of classic rabbinic question. What is the status of the entryway? Is the entryway public domain because anyone from the public can come into it? Or is it private domain because it is enclosed within the larger space? Okay, and that question is where we begin our discussion of Eruv in Masechet Eruvin. So let's now take a look at the opening of Tractate Eruvin and see let's see if we can, it is, as I said, very cryptic, but let's see if we can make any sense of it, okay? What's the concern here? We'll return to this line which seemed strange to us, but now maybe with the picture in mind, we can start to unpack it a little bit. If an alleyway is higher than 20 cubits, one must lower the height. And Rabbi Yehuda says one need not. If it is wider than 10 cubits, one must narrow it. However, if it has the form of a doorway, even if it's wider than 10 cubits, one need not narrow it. Okay, so let's go back and take a look at our picture. If this alleyway, which is a closed alleyway, it's almost like a room. It has one wall here, one wall in the back, and one wall here, but it's open on this side, okay? And Rabbi Yehuda says, if this space from here to here, the height of the walls is higher than 20 cubits, you've got to narrow it. What does he mean by that? He means that you have to do this. Put a koreh, a beam across the top, okay? And lower the height so that it is not 20 cubits, or let's say about 10 meters high. Okay, let's just start there and see if we can understand that idea. Why do you think the rabbis are saying that in an alleyway that leads out to the public, there has to be some kind of doorway or frame? And if the doorway is too high, you have to lower it. And if it's too wide, you have to narrow it. What's going on there? Okay. Let's see. I see Matt has a response to this.
When you were showing it, it just seemed, well, that's an opening. That's not just a space. And it really does, putting that bar on top. I'm not even sure I can tell you why. It probably has something to do with, catching my eye. But I see, without that bar, I've got a thing on the right, and that's to the left. And I've got a thing on the other side. I've got two things. Good. And putting the bar, pulls them together, says this is entryway. This Good. Is one thing. And I was seeing it as silly until I just looked at that picture. And, well, of course it's different. Of course it's now, it's dividing space. It's drawing a line between one place and the other, rather than, anyway, yes.
This is one of my favorite things about learning with Matt Silverstein, is that I saw it coming in the chat where he was just like, this is just ridiculous. And it's like, I could have seen that coming a mile away. Like, Matt always enters in the conversations a cynic, and yet Matt has a very open mind and is often convinced by our discussions as we start to have. So I'm grateful that we're like cracking away at Matt's standard. It's not even cynicism. It's a healthy skepticism is what it is. But that's right. What Matt is saying is this idea that you're not really lowering the height of the alleyway. You're not really narrowing the size of the doorway. You're putting a beam, a koreh on top, or a lechi is the name of the pole that moves up and down. You're putting that there in order to create the sense that this is a doorway to another domain. This creates a sense that this is, if it's too high, if it's higher than 20 feet, and by the way, we'll find this again when we come to the laws of sukkah, of building a sukkah. A sukkah also cannot be higher than 20 cubits, about 10 meters. And I think in both of these cases, Matt is describing something that would apply to both of these cases. There's just some sense that if you can't look up and see a ceiling if you can't identify an entryway, then it just feels like public space to you, okay? And so the beam across the top, it doesn't really change the structure. It's really a sign, a signal to you that this thing, this alleyway is part of private space. And if you look at the alleyway, it basically is part of private space. But this is here, right? It's already inside. Nobody else is going to be using it unless they go into this collective property. Now, it's different. If this was open, that's a different discussion. If this was open, then it's much harder to qualify it as private space because it can be used as a thoroughfare, okay? But it's closed at the back, so it clearly is private space, but you might, walking by, just see it as a thoroughfare, and you'll take something from the public and walk it on in. But if you see this beam, you realize that there's an entryway, there's a doorway here, and you're heading into another space, and that's a sign to you that you should not be transporting goods from one place into another, or the opposite, coming out of the space. And that is why, if there already is an official doorway, even if these parameters are you actually see the rabbis thinking about what is the field of our vision. How high do we generally look? How wide do we peripherally see? Unless there's a very elaborate doorway, in which case we don't need it. So now I think you're starting to get a sense of how the Eruv is meant to signal something to you that hopefully is already true in a certain way. Okay, now don't worry, we'll get to we'll stretch credulity soon, but that's where we're at now. Okay, let me go from Silberstein to Silberstein and take Susan's comment. Is much the same? Could you unmute for us? We can't hear you. I'm gonna unmute you. Let's see. Susan, we still can't hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
Can you hear me now? I
Yes.
should have lowered my hand. Matt and I have the
same
thought all the time.
Great.
I was thinking that the changing the size of the doorway just indicates that you're coming into a private dwelling rather
Great.
than a public courtyard. That's
Great.
it. I think that's what Matt was saying.
Good.
also.
Siblings think alike. Okay, great. Let's turn to some of our other hands. Yael or Ariella, either of you. Yael, you wanna? Yeah.
Yes. I'm interested in the changes, the ontological changes that happen to the space. And I think there's some indication of that when we have a sacred ritual that defines a space, it becomes one home. And I'm thinking of the marriage ceremony when the Hatan says, Im tabat zo at mekudeshet li. The bride, in fact, does become holy with that particular item, which has been designated as the sacred object. And I think these doorways and these eruvim, it's more than just us being aware of the space, but the space itself becomes different.
Good. This is a profound and philosophically sophisticated point that Yael is making, and she rightly uses the word ontology, like the understanding of existence, of reality. What constitutes the reality around us? And one of the things that constitutes the reality around us is physical matter, the construction of physical space. But when we talk about something like space, and especially when we talk about something like public and private space, our ontology is not just defined by that which exists in the material world, but also by our perception of it and our relationship to it. So what does it mean to say that a space is private? Is it just that we have agreed, we have designated this space, we consider this private domain? Or is it that other people will regard it or not regard it as private domain? And I think Yael is suggesting, by giving us other examples, that a lot of Jewish law is concerned with the construction of a conceptual reality, right? What is a married person? And how is a married person different than an unmarried person? In no physical way, but we recognize these different states of partnership that do have real world consequences. And we recognize it with the institution of, or the many various kinds of institutions of marriage, where a formal declaration changes the status of something here. So the beam here is not actually, I mean, it is a physical object. This is why the guy was getting tripped up in the video. Well, it's real, but it's not real, but it's real, but it's not real. It is meant to signal a change in the status of conceptual space, and that is part of our legal discourse. So it is, so there, that's an important thing to remember, not just about Eruv, but about the whole. What is Shabbat? Why is Shabbat different than the rest of the week? Nothing has changed in reality. What has changed is the designated reality. So that's important as well. Ariella and then Jen.
Well, at first, when you were talking about Eruv and it's not sanctioned by this rabbi or these groups, it reminds me of a cousin of mine that was a rabbi that moved to Calgary and was in charge of kashrut. And what he found very quickly was how many people have an opinion of what should be considered kashrut. And it's the same, I think, with on Eruv, when you get too many minds involved, because your thinking may be different from Rabbi Brause's thinking, and there just has to be some kind of consensus. And to me, what the eruv signifies is kind of like, on a Jewish home, we put up a mezuzah, and that signifies a Jewish home. And so too, that eruv signifies that this community has a common dwelling.
Good.
I mean, what makes mezuzah a symbol of a Jewish home other than that's what we say?
Okay, good. So, so I think that first of all, Ariella is saying there's always the possibility for multiple understandings and interpretations of the law. That's the whole tradition. But I think Ariella is also suggesting, and rightly, that when we are in the domain of these quote unquote loopholes, these sort of ways around the law or new institutions like ketubah, like these sorts of like later kind of extra legal institutions, there is more, because they by their very nature are hard to derive in the sources, right? Like, where are we getting this idea? Because they're almost like conceptual in their nature. There is an increasing possibility for disagreement and debate. And I'll just show you here quickly in the sources how correct Ariella is, because here's the first Mishnah in Eruvin, and if we were to click in here, we would see that it's been, I only gave you the actual text, but here's all the explanation. But in the very next Mishnah, there is a dispute with regard to the method of rendering an alleyway fit. Because Beit Shammai say you need a side post and a crossbeam, whereas Hillel says you need either a side post or a crossbeam, whereas Rabbi Eliezer said 2 side posts are required, and on and on and on. And then there's a disagreement over whether we even got the original opinions right. It gets pretty complicated pretty quick. And how could it not? I mean, it's just like the joke about the non-Jew and the Jews who have been learning together for 20 years. It's like, it's not a surprise that Eruv leads to disagreement and controversy, because it's not so clear exactly what it is anyway, and it's not in the Torah. So mezuzah also needs to be derived from the Torah, but everybody would be pointing to that same verse in Deuteronomy, right? So the further we get in our sort of process of interpretation, but significantly in our extra legislation, the more room for, wait a minute, like not just I disagree, but who gave you the authority to say something like that? Who made you? I mean, I think that's the way we look at Eruv, and that's the joke in the video. It's like, well, you just decided that you can do this? You just decided? Now, I hope you are seeing that the decision is not arbitrary, that it is meant to signal something real, but we're definitely in the realm of abstract thinking, and that allows for a lot of divergence here. Okay, let's take one more comment, and then we'll look at one more source from Jen.
I really love the idea that you can, and I know this happens with a lot of things, but in a particular way, sort of personalize the act of creation in this, and that the door can be a symbol and a reminder of that the world outside is chaos, right? And an act of creation has been made by putting up the Eruv and creating a little community or creating a space for family, and that you move from the chaos to the place of order through that door. That door is the creation or the reminder of creation that we're supposed to be resting from. So walking through that door and then staying there is moving through creation and going to that place of rest. And you're looking at that reminder all the time.
Yeah, I love the way you put that, Jen, as usual. It makes me think that we're just tossing around these terms like private space and public space, but what does it mean to create a shared space, a private space, we're together in this space? I mean, others have suggested that this is from the start. Yonatan was saying it's community building, but what Jen is saying is that that's a creative act to create private space requires us to be intentional, deliberate, and to signify it. Otherwise, what is the difference between private and public? It's all just space. But we need those designations in order to feel like these are my neighbors. This is my community. I am connected to these people. And there's an outside world. And that space, it's not just, oh, you crossed the line, you broke Shabbat. It's about being conscious of two very different realms of your existence, your life. We all have these realms, right? We are all, and the question of what constitutes public space, are we in public space right now? Are we in space at all? Right? Like the questions of what it means to be gathered together as a community, sharing meals, sharing ideas, sharing practices, those are serious questions. They're questions with real implications for our experience of ourselves in the world, and they require a creative act. It says, Jen, they require a signification. All right, let me give us one last step, and then we'll see if we have time for one last comment or two. But the last step, so far, we're just talking about within a very small space. How do we get to the idea that an entire city can be contained within an Eruv? How is that possible? There's no way that you can have an entire city that is considered a private space, can you? Okay, so as I said, it's very complicated, the movement from one to the other, and we won't be able to track it all now, but I want to give you the first kind of inkling of it, the suggestion that this space can get very big, and it comes in the 5th chapter of Eruvin, which is that, okay, if a private city, Ir shel Yachid, this is a funny phrase, a city of privateness, or a city of just one, grows and becomes a public city. Now, what does that mean? I think it means something like a gated community, or just a small collective of people living on their own, who are clearly small in number and clearly gathered together in a community. And there is a presumption here that there's some kind of structure around them, that there's some kind of wall that designates them. But what if, more and more people start moving into that private community, the numbers grow, and then it becomes a public community, okay? So one can establish a joining of the courtyards for all of it, okay? So imagine this, but there's another one here, and another one here, and another one here, and another one here, and it starts to grow and grow and grow. And there is the possibility now, we have all these private spaces, but it's clear that everybody's together in this same larger collective. So if we build a structure all the way around it, then we can join all of the alleyways, and imagine this leads now into another alleyway, into another alleyway, into another space. We can consider all of this joined together in one large courtyard. And then, interestingly, but if a public city becomes a private city, meaning the numbers have dwindled down, and now, so before, you start now with an assumption that everybody's not joined together, there's just a regular city, but it becomes a private city in the sense that there are fewer and fewer people in the city, and now everybody does know each other and does consider themselves joined together. What's the law there? You cannot establish an Eruv for all of it. You cannot do that. You can't convert public space into private space unless one maintains an area outside the Eruv that's just like the size of the city in Hadasha in Yehuda, in Judea, which has 50 residents. And then Rabbi Shimon says, actually, you only need a few residents. But the point is, you can create, it seems, from a big, vast public space, you can create a small collective of people that agree that even though this has been considered public space, we will agree that this is all our courtyard. But you can't do that unless you can identify some public space outside of it. In other words, you can't just call anything a private space. You need to have some public space in order for there to be a private space. And this gets back to a point that we've been circling around this whole time, which is the crossing over from private into public. And the suggestion here is that, yeah, we can, now that we've agreed that we can signal private space, we can do that in all kinds of creative ways, but we can't just call public space private space. Private space always needs to be something that is distinguished from another public space. So every Eruv has to have an opening that leads into a non-Eruv space, okay? And that is the beginning of what it might start to look like, to say, okay, this is private space. We're calling this private space because we can designate this as our neighborhood, even though it's not structurally fundamentally different from the space just outside of it, which we're calling not our neighborhood. Okay. All right. So that's the beginning of what starts as a very small institution joining together just a few households, and then beginning to say, well, what if we joined this square to another square to another square to another square, and how big could we go? Okay. We don't have time to map that all out today, but I'll take one last comment from Gary Sokol.
So I love the concept, how we laid it out at the beginning, that by expanding our definition of private space and to make it a public space, we can create a community. And I love that header, that leniency. But for all those people I know who hold by that header and of the Eruv, they're also become all of a sudden very machmir and strict, that not only must we create an Eruv, but it must be inspected every Shabbat. And if there's anything that breaks that, it no longer holds. So how does that work together with our original concept?
You know, I think you have, let's just call that like the closing of the class, because we won't be able to answer it now, but you've named, I think, one of the most important and significant tensions that are at play here, where that has to do with anxiety and ease and comfort. Because after all, remember, Shabbat is supposed to be a time of joy and comfort and tranquility. And we have a tension here, and Eruv has become a tension point, which on the one hand provides that tranquility, provides that ease of movement and that shared sense of community. And on the other hand, and partially because it is such a strange and kind of conceptually constructed concept, it's very easy to get into debates around it and what exactly constitutes it, and it can become an anxiety point. It can become a kind of a friction point between communities. And even for those who are fine with the Eruv, it's like checking it every week and making sure, and do we need to get an expert to come in, and did the expert get it right? And did you see the website before Shabbat? Was it up? Was it down? Did anything fall? And all of these things, and that's not what Shabbat's supposed to feel like. So I think you're exactly right to name that, you know, on the one hand, but on the other hand. On the one hand, the Eruv provides comfort, and on the other hand, it provides distress. And you know, that's part of the tension that we're navigating in this strange but hallmark institution of Jewish life. Okay, good to see you all, everybody. Maybe I'll see some of you tonight. Next week, we're not going to have class just because I'm traveling and I won't be back from Thanksgiving in time. So next week, we're not going to have class. I'll see you in 2 weeks.